Hello, and welcome to The Money Trench, the music industry podcast with me, Mark Sutherland. Thanks for all your lovely messages about us making it to our 100th episode. It was a fun week of celebrations, but today, the next century begins. The Money Trench is supported by SOUNDON. SOUNDON is TikTok's all-in-one music distribution and promotion platform for artists and labels. Go to soundon.global to find out more and check out the SOUNDON Track of the Week in the TMT newsletter. And the Money Trench is also supported by TIXEL, the honest ticket exchange and waitlist, helping artists own their audience and protect fans from touts. Go to TIXEL.com to find out more and check out the TIXEL Gig of the Week in the TMT newsletter. And we support Earth%, the music industry's climate foundation. Check earth%.org for all the details. And this week, we're in TYX Studios, where we're joined by one of the true pioneers of the UK and global music industry. He's been an agent, an artist manager, and he was the co-founder of the legendary independent Chrysalis label and music publisher, breaking artists in every era, from Jethro Tull and 10 Years After, to Blondie and Billy Idol, to Feeder and Moloko. Now back in the music business with a new label and publisher, Wright Tracks, please welcome the one and only Chris Wright.
Great to be here.
Hello, Chris. Welcome to the show. How's your music week been?
Interesting. Well, we're gearing up to have a bigger week. Big week. We're leaving here to go and sign an interesting new artist, which is going to hopefully be the highlight of the week.
Excellent. Can you tell us who that is?
Yeah, I can actually. Yeah, Ruby Duff, who we think is a really exciting young girl, writer, singer, performer, and that's going to be the next mission after this mission that we're on right now.
Well, I've heard some of the stuff. That's a great signing.
Have you heard any of Ruby's stuff?
I have, yeah. So excellent signing. Things are up and running. And I'm going to ask you how your music week was. So you have a music week again now, don't you, after some time away?
I do. It's very hot weather outside, and productivity slips a little bit when the weather's this hot. So I think we're gearing up to get all the nuts and bolts in order for today's signing, and that's been the focus of the week so far.
Fair enough. Well, you've already told me you've already played tennis this morning, Chris, so you're already ahead of most of the music industry.
Yeah.
But, great stuff. Let's see what the rest of the music biz has been up to with our roundup of the latest industry headlines. And our first story comes from Music Business Worldwide, which reports on the latest BPI figures for UK music exports. The stats show recorded music exports hit a record high of £800.3 million in 2025, but that was up just 0.8% year on year, despite an improved hit rate for UK breakthroughs. The BPI blamed the slowdown on the increased international competition from territories such as South Korea and Latin America. Chris, you're a former BPI chairman, of course. What do you make of these figures?
Well, I think they're interesting figures. They're not terrible. You know, the world economy is not in great shape right now. There is, the Trump war in the Middle East, and oil prices being affected by that, and inflation in America. I'm sure inflation is higher than it should be, and a lot of global aspects like that affect the figures. Overall, we're still producing a lot of music that sells throughout the world, and I think that's a good thing. It's also you do constantly need new artists coming along to stoke the fire a little bit. A lot of those numbers are regularly catalogue and artists that have been established for a while. But if you have somebody really new and really exciting, it's going to give it a little nudge too. I mean, if I was looking at those figures as an economist or a finance director or something like that, I wouldn't be overly concerned about the fact that there is a little bit of a dip in growth. They're still pretty impressive figures, and it's a great thing that British music is so important worldwide. I mean, I travel a lot. I've always traveled a lot, and it's just always a wonderful thing. You can jump off a plane in wherever, like Marrakesh, Morocco, or anywhere at all, and you get in a taxi and turn on the radio and you hear one of your records and you think, wow, isn't that great? And it is great.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the BPI are sort of saying there's increased international competition. I guess when Chrysalis was starting, the music industry was about UK and US artists and not much else. Has that changed the game now that sort of hits can come from anywhere?
Well, it's been a growing trend, hasn't it, for quite some time? I mean, we did, in the end of the last century, we had German artists, we had Dutch artists that were doing well internationally, and then we had a big Swedish boom, obviously with ABBA and their contribution, and other Swedish artists as well. I think that, and you've always had Latin American artists. I think the big difference is the Korean and Japanese, Southeast Asia. You never really saw that as being an artist developing area, but it is now, and in a very big way. But maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, that was a market that we sent our artists to, but we didn't expect to be listening to any of their artists on the worldwide stage. But the rest of it, yeah, it's always been there. Even back in the days of the jazz boom in the 60s, there were Danish and Dutch jazz groups that were performing well internationally. There's always been an international element to the music business.
Excellent stuff. And do we still have the talent to compete internationally, do you think?
Well, I'm sure we have the talent. In order for the talent to break through, it needs to have a fertile breeding ground. It needs the opportunities for artists to get off the ground, to find people to support them and let them develop their careers, both domestically initially and then internationally. And we do have that. And if we move on to another story about live venues, I don't want to jump ahead, but you do need a fertile domestic environment for British artists to prosper and thrive, and for people to want to develop their careers. And we do have that, but we can't take it for granted, because it's very important that we nurture it.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see how that develops. But as you hinted, Chris, our next story comes from Music Week, which looks at the industry reaction to new Prime Minister Andy Burnham's 20% business rate cut for venues. The move has been backed by the Music Venue Trust as well as other trade bodies, although some have asked for the cut to be extended to recording studios. Chris, you basically started out booking shows on the grassroots circuit, didn't you? So, or certainly the college circuit up at Manchester University. Is it still as important nowadays as it was back then?
Well, I think it has to be important. It's a hugely vital part of the whole industry, and it has been suffering badly. I mean, I welcome what Andy Burnham's done here. I think it's a step in the right direction. You might say it's a bit of a gimmick because it's not a lot of money. I don't think it's going to change the landscape enormously, but it does show that he and the new government have this in their sights, which is definitely a good thing. He was at the Silver Clef Awards at the Albert Hall a couple of weeks ago. I didn't get to chat to him myself then, but it's good that he was there, and it's good that they're focusing attention on this area. I don't think the actual monetary sum is going to make a huge amount of difference. It probably needs to be quite a lot more for it to do that.
Definitely. I mean, the sort of life of grassroots venues is fairly precarious at the moment. Are there other things you'd like to see happen to help them out?
Well, I think it needs probably a much more serious conversation than just saying we'll knock a little bit of money off the rates. I'm not quite sure what the actual solution is, but certainly putting some initiative into getting young people jobs so that they can afford to go to the clubs and the live music venues is going to be an important part, because like everything, there's an element of cost driven here as well, that if you can't afford to go, you're not going to be able to go. Obviously the venues need to exist. They need to exist on limited income coming in if they're struggling. And the government's initiative this week, great idea, but can we please have a bit more? But if we can put a bit more money into the hands of the young people, then the venues are going to be doing better anyway, because they'll have more people being able to turn up.
Yeah, true. And do you think, you used to own a recording studio, a very famous one, should they be included in this cut?
It's an interesting thought. Yes. Yeah, we did own a lot of recording studios, including Air Studios London, which was one of the most foremont studios in the world, and also Air Studios Montserrat as well, if you remember going back then, and all the different people that recorded there. I don't know, because the studio business is in a different space now. I think we should look at it. I wouldn't say we should be hammering away that we should get a reduction in rates for studios, but I think we should look at it, and we might come up with an area. Well, for certain kinds of studios, yes, we should do that. A large commercial studio which is still doing very well, if that exists still to these days, maybe that's a different thing. But smaller studios that are working with younger artists, working with newer artists, helping get them off the ground. Yes, I think that I'd say, let's look at it and let's see what we can do, rather than having a blanket overall rate reduction across the board.
Okay, well, we'll see what Andy Burnham does next. But our final story comes from Music Ally, which digs into the latest YouTube revenues. YouTube ads generated over $11 billion last year, up 12.9%. But Alphabet boss Philip Schindler says its subscription business, including YouTube Music, is now growing faster than its ads business. Chris, you grew up in the physical music business, of course. How do you feel about streaming?
Well, look, I mean, it is what it is, isn't it? I mean, it's the world we live in. If you'd asked me 30, 40 years ago if it was going to work out this way, especially coming from a base of where people expected to pay nothing, which is, remember those days when, it was all free. The alternative to listening free was the buying an album or a CD, and, it's hard to compete with free. Well, then, we as an industry get an infinitesimally small amount, but it does all add up. And there are different delivery systems, whether it's just audio only or audio and visual. And interestingly, around the world, people do access differently. In some places, it's more audio. In some places, more audio visual. And it depends a lot on where Apple is big and where Apple isn't big. Like, I think in South America, where Apple is not so big because it's a more expensive product, then they're listening in other ways there. To be honest, I wouldn't say I was an expert on all of the numbers worldwide, but as long as people are listening to music, and if they want to do that by paying for it, then great, let's encourage that.
Thanks very much. And don't forget, for even more music industry insights, sign up for the TMT newsletter at themoneytrench.com. But now it's time to talk to this week's guest, Chris Wright of Wright Tracks. Chris, you've been basically out of the music industry for 10 years. What made you want to come back?
Oh my God, why did I?
Did you miss us?
Yes, I did. I mean, I moved from the being just music industry to TV production and radio stations and other things like that. And we had a very large company at one point in time, and music wasn't in the entire part of it. And I enjoyed being in the other areas that I was in. And then I enjoyed for a while not really being in anything. And then I started thinking, well, what really defines my life? I mean, my life, is it defined by heart radio? Not really. I mean, nobody listens to heart radio and thinks, Chris Wright, good job, mate. Is it defined by TV shows? Yes. We did create Midsummer Murders, and it's still going, but people don't watch Midsummer Murders and think, bloody hell, Chris Wright, good job, mate, did what, But then when they listen to, whether it's Jethro Tull or Ultravox or Spandau Ballet or Blondie or Billy Idol or something like that, I think they do think, yeah, Chris Wright, and his ex-partner at the time as well, good job. And if it wasn't for him, we might not have had those artists. And I'm really associated with that. And I'm thinking, well, really what defines my life and my career more than anything else, and including like football and rugby and other things I've been involved in, is music. So look, at the end of the day, if people think of me, what do they think of? They think of music, and they think of artists that I've been involved in. So yes, if I'm going to have a last chapter to the book, let's make the last chapter what it really should be, and let's make it music. And then how did I get into this? A friend of mine who he wasn't really in the music business that to any great extent, played me some tracks by an artist, and I thought they were really good, and I thought the guy really wrote great songs and was really prolific, and he had a band. I listened to the band and I met the artist, and I thought, this is good, and I'd like to be involved in trying to help his career or help their career. So initially I wasn't planning on being a record company. Initially I said, you know what, I said, they're great songs and you don't have a publishing deal. I do have a little publishing company, which is very, very, not really that operational, but at least it had all of the component parts. So I said, I'll sign you to a publishing deal and I'll work on developing your career and we'll get you a record deal. And then, hey ho, we're in great shape. Because, rather naively, I was working on the old business model. That's how it worked. But of course, the further we went, it became clear that getting a record deal was not going to be very easy. So they keep saying to me, well, why don't you be the record company? I said, no way am I being a record company again. I mean, I've done that. I'm definitely not doing that. And I'm now a record company. Yeah.
And who was the artist? Who was the artist?
This is the Black Lounge. Okay. The artist is called George Grant. And he really is very, very good. And we're now into his second single. We now have an album. We've now got a complete album finished. Danton Supple produced it in Rack Studios, just down the road from here. There's some great tracks on there. The track that really hit me the first time round when I was listening to demos, which is now nearly a couple of years ago, is still not released as a single, but we're holding it back until we've got a bigger base to put it out. And then, I thought, well, okay, so I won't be a record company, but we'll make the record and we'll find a way of releasing the record, and then we'll get a little bit of a buzz going, and then that way we might get a deal with a major. But then it still isn't easy to get a deal with a major. Then I'll find out, actually, the majors really aren't doing anything. And I'm thinking, so if we actually do all of this and we get it off the ground and we have some success, am I going to then hand it over to a major? Maybe not. Why should I? Because I think we can do it all ourselves anyway. But let's see how we get on. First, we've got to get the success. But that's how it all started.
Yeah. So you're starting up this new company.
Yes.
How does it feel starting up this company compared to when you started up Chrysalis?
Well, of course, I'm older, which is a factor, because when I was younger, of course, I could work 24 hours a day, and I could be in pubs and clubs all night if I needed to be, and that doesn't quite go with the lifestyle these days quite so much. So, but I do have a great little team of people around me. I feel really, really confident in the team of people that I have around me, that I can do what we need to do. And over the years of Chrysalis, you go through times when you think you've got good people, and when you're not so sure you've got good people. And it's not all down to me; it's down to the team of people. And I do think we have the right team of people to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And I feel very confident about that.
Mm. And what do you want to achieve? Do you want to be as big as Chrysalis was the first time round?
I think that would be impossible. I think, we've got, with the artists that we're signing later today, we'll have 4 artists. I always said 5's enough. Obviously, when we were Chrysalis, we had loads and loads of artists. If we had 5 successful artists, we'd obviously be building the infrastructure at the company, and we could see where we go. But right now, let's not think about 5 successful artists. Let's hope we have 1 successful artist, and then we can take it from there. Because it's not easy. I was naive to think a couple of years ago that I could sort of put my toe in the water and make it work. Well, my toe's not in the water, my whole body's in the water now, but I've still got to make it work. It's sink or swim.
Yeah, it's a completely different business to it was 10 years ago. Never mind when you first started. Are there lots of new things you've sort of had to get your head around?
Everything. Yeah. Absolutely everything. absolutely everything. But I mean, some of it still remains the same. I mean, the basics are the same. You need a good artist that writes great songs and can put those songs into a great record with some help from whoever. And you need to get that music to a wider market. I mean, those are the fundamentals. But getting that music to the wider market is really different. I remember when I signed Black Lounge, then I thought I needed an A&R, a younger A&R person. So I found a younger A&R person, and over the years I've had some very good A&R people working for me, as you know, that have gone on to become very major people in the industry.
We've had a few of them on this podcast.
Yes, and I mean it's been something that at Chrysalis we did do, that we a lot of important people passed through our ranks. So I got a young A&R guy, Joseph Spiteri. Strange name, it's a Maltese name, and if you're thinking Spiteri, I know that name. It's because of
Charlene
Spiteri. So it's a Maltese name. So she obviously has Maltese heritage as well. Anyway, so at least everybody's heard of the name through Charlene, which I think is a bit of a help to Joseph. But I said, well, when you go and see groups in clubs, I said, you'll know that there's something happening when you turn up and you're the only A&R guy there, and then the next gig you go to, there's a couple of others, and then, the third or fourth gig you go to, there's like a dozen. So are you seeing that? No, I never see any other A&R people at the gigs I go to.
They don't go to gigs anymore, Chris. They're all on TikTok.
Exactly. And it took me a while to figure that one out. But we, at Right Tracks, we do go to gigs.
Excellent. I mean, you're mainly working, well, all your artists are new artists. Is that what you want to concentrate on? You don't want to sort of sign up established talent? No, I'm not saying that one would turn down the opportunity if it arose, but at Chrysalis, we never signed established artists. My whole life's been about signing new artists that no one's heard of. Yeah. I really know of no other way of doing it. And I doubt that somebody established would walk through the door anyway. But if they did, sure, we'd deal with it, and we would offer them, our advice and our help if we could be of any assistance to them. But I'm not expecting that to happen. I'm expecting that any artist we sign will be a new artist that we have discovered off the ground floor. Yeah, I mean, you've signed some of the greatest artists of all time. Does that mean you're very difficult to impress for a new artist? I always say to everybody, when we're looking at a group or an artist, I always said in the past, I said, can you see them on stage at Madison Square Gardens? And I don't say that now because, we're in England and Madison Square Gardens isn't everything. But I do say, could you see them on the main stage at Glastonbury? And if you look at them when they're a baby artist, and you think, could you see them on the main stage at Glastonbury or somewhere like that? And really, yes, you want to see somebody that you think does have that potential to get that far. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to break artists these days. You've broken a lot previously in your career. Are you confident you can break artists the way you used to it? No, I'm not confident. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I'm not confident. I wish I was, but I mean, we're just going to give it our best shot, and what more can we do? But even back in the Chrysalis days, you were never completely confident. But yes, you felt you were on the right track, and you got early pointers and signs that you were moving in the right direction. But even then, in those days, some of the artists that you signed that you really thought were going to be big weren't. And some of the artists that were big were ones that, were on the back row of the roster and suddenly made their presence felt. So you never really know, but it is difficult. And I wish I could be completely confident that I can. I have to tell myself we can. Otherwise, there'd be no point in doing it. But is it going to be easy? No, it's not. I know that. Have you learned over the years to sort of recognise the signs of what an artist needs in order to make it, as it were? Are there things that set those artists apart? Well, I think so, yes. I mean,
Yes, I mean, they need a certain attitude. They've got to have the talent. They have to have the belief in their talent. And, most people don't get up on stage in front of, half a dozen people and perform unless they've got belief in their talent, never mind in front of 20,000 people or more. So, it's not something that necessarily you or I would do, thinking that, yeah, I'm going to knock them dead here. But so they've got to have that. They've got to have the right attitude. They've also got to have a bit of common sense between their ears as well. And I've always felt a little bit like a bank manager when you're sort of auditioning or seeing an artist for the first time, that you're not just seeing the talent, you're seeing whether that human being has got what it takes to deal with the stress of everything, because it's not easy. And I remember there are artists that I didn't sign because I heard there were difficulties and problems. I remember when I was supposed to go and see I was in LA. I was supposed to go and see a group in Tucson or Phoenix. I didn't go because I heard there were it wasn't all plain straightforward, and they turned out to be a really, really big group. But it happens like that. You don't think, did I make a mistake? Sure, in a way, yes, but no, I didn't, because I didn't go and see them for a reason, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a very competitive business, isn't it? You've got major labels, indie labels. People can do things themselves nowadays. I go, well, what can Right Tracks offer that all those other options?
Well, I mean, I would say, you say it's a very competitive, very difficult bit. Every business is difficult and competitive. I mean, and the only way that you're successful, in my mind, in any business is wherever it is. If you're making nuts and bolts, the only way you're going to be successful is if you're making better nuts and bolts than anyone else. Otherwise, why is anyone going to buy your nuts and bolts? And in music, if you're going to be successful, you've got to be better than anybody else. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So, we have to show that we've got the ability to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about you, because you've had a long and illustrious career in the music industry. But you started as a social secretary at Manchester Uni. In fact, I think you were one of the people that probably made that the key sort of pathway into the music industry.
There are quite a lot of others that started off as social secretaries from that era.
Yeah.
Obviously, my ex-partner was at Newcastle University, and Doug Darcy, who was part of Chrysalis, followed me at Manchester University. I know other people that were at Chrysalis. Will Wright, I think, was at Hull University. He was part of us, managed Robin Trower and for us. And I know a lot of people. I mean, Emma Banks was at Reading, I think, and
Rob Stringer. There's been
I mean, it wasn't a pathway, because there was no sign of a pathway in those days. But I was at Manchester University. It was a very exciting time to be there, because it was the time that the Beatles were breaking, and they were just up the road in Liverpool. And then there was a spin over into Manchester with the Manchester groups at the time, like, they were quite big, like the Hollies and Freddie and the Dreamers and Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders, that were part of, like adjacent to what was happening in Liverpool. I remember being at the uni one day, and there were people talking about, they went to the Three Coins, which was like a little club that held about 200 people, and there were like 650 people inside and hundreds more outside to see a group from Liverpool, the Beatles. And so this was all sort of exciting. And
did you get in?
No, I didn't know. And I got elected onto the student council for no good reason. And then when you're on the student council, everybody's got to do a job, and I became originally the assistant social secretary, but the social secretary failed his exams and couldn't come back next year. So I suddenly got promoted to being the social secretary, and that was it. And then, well, yes, I mean, from a standing start, I'm suddenly becoming one of the biggest promoters in the country without realizing it. And of course, it was fun. It was fantastic. I mean, what a life to have. I had my own office, and in the university union. I'm promoting all of these artists.
Well, you became an agent, a manager, and then you met Terry Ellis and formed Chrysalis. Did you? And he was was he kind of like a rival? He was sort of doing what you were doing at the time.
Well, he was, yes. Yeah. I mean, Terry was a year older than me, and he was a year ahead of me, and he because of his Newcastle connection, knew Mike Jeffries from the Animals, and Mike Jeffries did a kind of similar thing with him, let him start a little business, like trying to get artists to colleges. And I think actually it didn't work out as it should have done, and Terry then got a proper job, but he was doing it in his spare time. And he had his colleges, and the big group that we all wanted to book at the time was Cream, with Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. And I was booking them into colleges, and I knew the agency wanted £300 a night for them, and you had to put on top whatever you were putting on top. So 10% makes it 330. So I was offering Cream to universities 330, and if the guy was smart, the social secretary was smart, it'd probably knock me down to 320. And I was talking to Birmingham University, and he said, I can get them for less than that. I said, no, you can't. And I said, okay, £310 and don't tell anybody for Cream. Okay. And then he comes back to me and says, no, I can get them for 300. I said, well, I know 100% sure you can't. And he said, I can. Who from? Terry Ellis. So I knew that Terry was selling them in for nothing. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Because if he's going to be, like competing with me and selling groups for no profit, it's ridiculous. So I called him up and said, I think we ought to meet.
Yeah. And did you realise that relationship was going to be so successful? Because obviously you turned Chrysalis into this empire, didn't you?
No, you never know that, do you? You just don't know that. I mean, I'm like 21, 22 years old. I'm a kid straight out of college. I'm living on oxygen and not much else. And you don't think that, do you? Of course you don't. But actually, we did start the Ellis Wright agency in his bed sit in Shepherd's Bush.
Reading your book, those early years were quite chaotic. A bit hand to mouth. I think you sort of nearly went bust several times.
Oh yeah.
What did you learn from that? Because it wasn't like easy. It wasn't an easy thing to do, was it? Set up a music company.
I don't know what you do learn from it. I think you learn that nothing comes easy and there's no givens. But going back, as I say, I was 21, 22 years old. You know no fear.
Yeah.
When you're that age.
Yeah. And you and Terry obviously had a very successful partnership, but reading your book, you were quite often at odds, weren't you? Did that help, do you think? That there was a little bit of...
a little bit of competition between us, would help. Definitely, there was. I mean, like when I started with 10 Years After, who were doing really, really well, and then, I mean, it was me that brought Jethro Tull in through... because I knew them from, they were the John Evans band from Blackpool, and I put them on at Manchester University for like a tenner a night. And in fact, they were a 7-piece group. They wanted to move to London. And I told them the guitarist wasn't good enough. And in those days, it was all down to the guitarist. And I knew a guitarist, Mick Abrahams, that had been in a group called the Toggery, and they were in Luton. And I put them together, and Ian Anderson and the rest of them moved down to Luton to work with Mick Abrahams, and they're ready to go on. We booked them gigs as a 7-piece group. And the first gig they perform at, I called the social secretary next to me. How were they? Great sound for only 4 of them. What do you mean? There's supposed to be 7. And I called up Ian. I said, what the hell's going on, Ian? And he said, well, they all got homesick and went back to Blackpool, and they just left me and one other guy, the bass player. And that's how they started. Anyway, but then because I was too tied up with 10 Years After, Terry took over really managing Jethro Tull. And there was always like a little bit of needle and competition about whose artists were doing better, which was healthy. But I think it got to the point where it became a little bit out of control.
Yeah. But no, you hit it big as an indie label. Some of those bands you're talking about, 10 Years After, Jethro Tull. But this was the early days of the independent business, wasn't it? So it was you guys, Island Records, etc.
Yeah.
Did it feel like you were sort of changing the way the music industry operated?
No.
But you were, weren't you?
I know. I mean, again, we just did what we did, But yes, we were aware of Island Records Island. I mean, initially we had a distribution deal with Island, or a license deal with Island, and that's how we started off. And Chris Blackwell was doing that. He started off like that, selling, Millie Small singles out the boot of his car, and I mean that's how it started. Jerry Moss with A&M, with Herb Alpert and the Lonely Bull. I mean, the same thing. You start off with something. Did Jerry Moss and Herb Alpert know what it was going to build into when Herb Alpert recorded the Lonely Bull? No, of course they didn't. It's just you've got a record and you try and sell it. And the only reason that we started the record label is because we couldn't get a record deal for Jethro Tull. And then when I got the advance from the music publishing company to pay for the 10 years after flights to go to America, Terry went and didn't give it to the travel agency in my absence, but spent it putting Jethro Tull in the studio, making a record. And then we couldn't get anyone to sign the group, and we had the record. That's how we started Chrysalis Records.
Well, fair enough. I mean, it worked out pretty well, didn't it? And I guess you were at the heart of the hippie scene in those days, and it was the sort of early days of the live circuit that we know today. There were a lot of casualties in that era, but you seem to cope with it.
I mean, the number of casualties from that era, it's terrible to see, and beyond that as well. And look, we all sail pretty close to the wind, and it's amazing that I'm still here and happy and healthy and everything. A lot of other people, a lot of my friends and contemporaries, and some the least you would expect it from, just didn't make it. And, it was a tough life. You think, touring's easy. It's not easy. And, yeah, I mean, it's sad to think of the people that didn't make it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Chrysalis was one of those labels that managed to adapt to the changing musical climate. Not every label could do that, but you were successful in every era. I guess punk, finished off a lot of bands, a lot of music companies, but you ended up with Blondie. You made Blondie the biggest band in the world, but they were on a independent label, right?
Yeah.
It must have been quite a ride.
Well, Blondie was amazing. We had Billy Idol as well, signed Generation X. I'll come back to Blondie in a sec. Could have signed the Sex Pistols. I had them in my office to sign them, and we were about five. He wanted 5,000. Malcolm McLaren. He wanted £5,000 more than I was prepared to offer them, and he said, if you don't, so we've got a meeting with EMI, and if you don't give us the 5,000, I'm going there. I didn't believe he'd signed with EMI. I didn't think it was the right home for the Sex Pistols. So actually I said, no, that's my deal. I said, I want an answer by tomorrow morning. And then I think it was Chris Briggs or someone like that. It might have been Chris Briggs at the time, working in the A&R department. I said, when they leave the office, go and shadow them. I want to see if they go to EMI. So I come in the next morning. It never went to EMI. I said, right. So they call me up and I say, no, that's my offer. Take it or leave it. So we'll sign in with EMI then. and that's how close we were to signing the Sex Pistols. But Blondie
didn't work out very well for EMI.
No, it didn't work out. But you know what? They signed with EMI because they could use EMI to generate all of the anti-establishment publicity that they did. And look at the value they got when EMI had to fire them and drop them off the label. And then they went to A&M, and then when it didn't work out at A&M either, then they came back to me and said, well, we always wanted to be with you anyway, so we'll sign with you now. And at this point in time, I said, no, twice bitten, once shy or whatever. But no, Blondie, I mean, they were fantastic. And, give Terry Ellis, my ex-partner, he signed Blondie, simple as that. I didn't sign them, he signed them. All he did was call me up and say, we're going to have to buy the contract from Larry Utall at private stock, and it's going to cost something like $550,000 or something, which was unheard of at the time. All I said was, okay, go for it. That was my involvement. But actually then, because there was no kind of punk scene in America at the time, and they were a punkish group, they broke first in Europe. They broke first in Australia, actually, and then in Holland, which we were handling out of the UK. Then in the UK, and America came later, because there wasn't really the right marketplace for them there. But they were fantastic. She is fantastic. Everything about them was fantastic. The drummer was fantastic, Clem Burke. He's just died now, sadly, from cancer. But listen to any Blondie record and listen to the drumming and imagine it without Clem Burke. It ain't the same. And she wrote most of those songs. She looked incredible. She had a great voice. I mean, it was amazing. And we built them up with what they had inherently, obviously, to be probably the biggest act in the world. And then it all derailed. Tragically, they get back together and they've missed out on maybe 2 or 3 years of when it was absolutely massive. You know, you just think of everything that went on. I mean, Led Zeppelin, we were very close to. Peter Grant worked in the office above us in Oxford Street. He and I were so close. We were like that. He was like a real mentor for me because he'd done it all, especially in America. And we were the agency for the New Yardbirds, as they were called, at the Chrysalis agency, and then Led Zeppelin. We did all of their early bookings, and then Led Zeppelin became what they became, the biggest band in the world, and fantastic. And then, you know, that all derailed as well. And then Pete, even a smart guy from, like, you know, the rough edge of town that's made this whole life for himself with Peter, from, you know, all of the hard work and everything he put into it, and it affected him as well.
Yeah,
he died.
Yeah, that was often the way.
We are making through Chrysalis Vision, we are working on doing a film on the life story of Peter Grant, and I think we're going to get it financed, and it will be a fascinating film.
Yeah, well, we'll look forward to seeing that. But I guess Chrysalis, by the 80s, you joined the establishment. You were such a big label. You, in fact, were chairman of the BPI in the 80s, and you basically invented the BRIT Awards, didn't you? It happened once before, but you brought them back as a regular.
Well, event. I used to go to the Grammys, and I thought, this is fantastic. This is a real celebration of our industry, and we didn't have anything like it in England. And there was, I think, a Music Week Awards or the Record Mirror Awards or something like that. And people say, oh, we've got that. I said, no, it's not the same thing. I said, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And so I had resistance when I started it, because people were saying, oh, we're going to upset the Record Mirror or whatever, or we'll upset Music Week if we take away their thunder. But I said, no, we're going to do it. And it started off as the BPI Awards was its first name, and it was a spectacular thing, like at the Grosvenor House or somewhere like that, with all of the major awards and all the major artists performing. And then I changed the name, because the BPI Awards didn't sound great, the British Record Industry Awards, which sounded a lot better. And from the British Record Industry Awards, it became the Brits.
Yeah. Did you think it was going to turn into this behemoth that it is today?
Yes, because it was pretty big from the minute it started. And we did get it televised, and if you see one of those early British Record Industry Awards, maybe even in black tie and in the Grosvenor House or whatever, and look at that, and and we had Prince, and we had all the major artists there. Yes, and people performing live as well in that environment. Yes, it was already pretty big before it became the Brits. Yeah. Really was.
Yeah, fantastic. And then Chrysalis. So you kind of ended up buying out Terry. The company went public, and then you sold half the company to EMI, and then you sold the label entirely to them in 1991. I think It must have been a tough thing to let go of, wasn't it? After all the work you
Yeah, it's really a shame that happened. But the whole thing, see, Terry and I were 50% partners. When Terry left the company, I had to find a load of money to buy him out. In fact, I think I paid Terry at the time not 50% of what the company was worth, but close to 100% of what the company was worth. Because I thought, well, if I didn't do that, I had nothing anyway. So, whatever it was going to cost was what I had to do. And I took on a massive amount of borrowing, and my finance director at the time came up with the idea of a merger with another music company which had been started by Gordon Mills, who managed Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. And we structured a deal to merge with them, which then they were a public company with institutional shareholders. So I went from being a 50-50 partner with Terry Ellis to being 100% owner for a brief period of time with a massive debt on my back, to being a 50% owner with institutional shareholders. And then when you're a public company, you start using your shares to fund the business and build other businesses. So I gradually went down to being a 40% shareholder and then a 30% shareholder. So when you're a 30% shareholder, you don't actually have complete control of the business anyway. And a lot of the moves that were made were not necessarily moves that one would have done if one had been a private company and had complete control over it. But because I never started off having complete control over it, I was never really in that unleveraged situation that I didn't have a paymaster that was dictating to me what I could and couldn't do.
Yeah. And then you kept the publishing company on for a while longer. In fact, you had another label, Echo Records.
Echo, yeah.
And then you sold the publishing company to BMG in 2016.
Well, yes. I mean, what happened was that I would never have sold the publishing company ever. But we had the record company, in hindsight, I mean, I had 70, 80 people working for us in America. And we had a disrupted product flow. We had Billy Idol apart from Blondie, Billy Idol was our biggest artist at the time. Billy had problems. Then he had his motorbike accident, but Billy had issues. Let's just say issues, without being too specific. And every time I'm waiting for the Billy Idol album to be delivered, it's like, come down the studio and listen to it. And it's like, well, you haven't done anything since I came 6 months ago. And but you can't sort of lay off your staff and say, hang on, guys, we haven't got any records coming out for, because they're coming out next week, but they weren't coming out next week. So, we got into a mess financially with a large overhead in America. I should have, in hindsight, if I'd retrenched out of America and kept the label just outside America, I think we could have survived that. But it got to the point where, again, it was financial pressure, and the way out was to do what was a 10-year joint venture with EMI. Well, 10 years seems a long time, and a joint venture sounds like it's a joint venture. But when situations like that, it's never 10 years. And, EMI, right, we've got one foot in the door now, we bang the door down and get the rest. And that's what happened there.
Yeah.
But in selling the publishing company, no, I would never have sold that. But an activist shareholder decided that the share price was too low and that the company was worth more money than the share price reflected. Very often happens. So he managed to effect a situation where he bought like 10+ % of the company from other institutional shareholders, and then agitated to have a forced sale of the company so he could make a quick buck on his investment. And I got caught by that.
Yeah. Did you think you were done with the music industry at that point?
Well, I must say the point in time that was happening, it was the industry was in its very, very lowest point. It was before the streaming deal. It was when people were downloading everything for free, and values were plummeting. The values of record companies had plummeted to almost nothing a record company was worth almost nothing by 2010. And I was advised by financial advisors that the same thing would happen to music publishing, and that, they'd stop making CDs and music business was finished. That was, for 2 or 3 years, that was the sentiment. And that was the reason I was kind of boxed into that corner and couldn't get out of it. Did I think, I did think it was finished. And then because that was what everyone was saying. And then when Mercuriadis started buying catalogues, and I'm thinking, well, how stupid. But of course it wasn't stupid, and he was right. And the deal with Spotify, which we talked about earlier, maybe not the greatest deal ever made, but at least, a fraction of something is worth more than nothing. And that fraction of something built and built and built, and we got to the point now where we have a vibrant industry again. But there was a period between about 2009, 2010, 2011, when the perception was that the game was up.
Yeah, definitely. And then you came back as non-executive chairman of Chrysalis when Blue Raincoat bought that business in 2016. What was it like second time around?
Well, at that point in time, I was still under contract to BMG as part of the BMG purchase of Chrysalis Music. So I could not bid for it myself, otherwise I would have done. But Jeremy Lascelles and Robin Miller did. And at the point in time that the deal was about to close, I was out of my non-compete situation, and I could join them in a minority shareholding situation, which they wanted me to do. They felt that would help them get that deal across the line, and I'm sure it did. So I went back into that with Jeremy and Robin and Robin Devereaux, who was Richard Branson's previous brother-in-law, and no, it felt great. And I would never have sold it. I would have kept going with that, definitely. And yes, I did enjoy it. No, and it was a shame that I think Robin fell out with Robert Devereaux and got to the point where there was a deal to sell it, and which would have kept Jeremy and Robin on running it. And well, again, I mean, I had to go along with it, but I would have kept it, definitely. I mean, it was great to be back with it, and I wish I could have had a more significant role where I could have retained that, because that would have been great.
Yeah. Well, you're back in the business now with your own company, and
on the very much ground floor.
Yeah, well, that's the best place to be sometimes. But what would you like your legacy to be, as it were, when people sort of look at this remarkable career of yours?
Well, I think there's probably enough there that to create a legacy anyway, without stroking my own furrow too much. But if I could do it again, it would be unbelievable. But I don't know if I can. But if I could, it would be unbelievable. But there's enough there already anyway. So if I could do it again, if we could, even with just one artist, and I'm not highlighting one particular artist, but if we can do it again, wow, wouldn't that? I mean, I think that would be amazing. And then, we had some really, really major artists, but I'd like to think there's one even bigger.
Okay. Well, it's going to be fun finding out. But thanks, Chris. Please stick around for Latest or Greatest, which is coming right up. And if you're enjoying The Money Trench, supported by SOUNDON and TIXEL, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice, as it really does help us keep making this podcast. But now it's time for our quickfire round with our guest, the legendary Chris Wright. Chris, this is called Latest or Greatest. You can decide to talk about either the most recent or the all-time best music biz thing that you've experienced in these categories. We start with the latest or greatest record that you've bought. Do you still buy records?
Well, I still listen to music. I mean, I don't go into the record shop like I used to. I really love what Bruce Springsteen was doing on the political side. I mean, with the Minnesota thing, the Minneapolis thing, God, I mean, I played that record non-stop. Thought it was great. That was really, really a highlight in terms of something when I couldn't get enough of something to play. So I might say that.
Okay, good choice. The latest or greatest gig or festival that you've been to?
Well, back in the day, I've been to so many festivals. I'm not a current festival goer. It might have to change.
What was the best one?
So it was
you
a
saw?
great gig I went to was just before Christmas when Finn Forster, who we got signed to the music publishing company, was supporting the Stereophonics on his arena tour. I went to the O2 and I thought that was a great gig, and I think he did a fantastic job for an artist that, 99% of the people wouldn't have heard of when he came on stage, to really finish up with them in the palm of his hand. And I thought, well done you, Finn. And I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I was at that gig. He did do a great job. So
well done. You thought so too?
Yeah. We made him a TMT tip after that.
Oh, so, well done you.
Yeah, so good stuff. Your latest or greatest music biz boss? I mean, you've kind of been the boss for a long time, but...
Well, I knew I had to, I've never had a boss. I mean, even back in the days, when I alluded to when Ian Hamilton said, I'll give you a phone and a desk, he was kind of a little bit like a boss, although he wasn't paying me a salary. And then that ended because I had 10 years after who I was getting gigs all over the college circuit with. And then in the summer, there were no colleges. So I asked Ian if he could get gigs in some of his clubs. And he got them a gig at a club in Hanley, in Stoke-on-Trent, Hanley, the Place in Hanley, which was a big gig on the date sheet at the time in the summer. But of course, they were a blues rock group, and they were playing at a gig where it was full of girls with their handbags on the floor dancing around the handbags, and they didn't go down very well. And the promoter called up Ian the next day and said, "Well, what are you doing? Send me that group." And, the worst group. And he came into my office and he said, if we do anything else like that, I'm going to be dead. I mean, either they go or you go. And I said, "Ian, I'm afraid it's me then." And I left. But that was the closest I had to a boss, except Roberta's now my boss, my PA. She's in charge now. She's the best boss I've ever had.
Okay, well that's everyone needs a boss of some sort. But you created a lot of bosses at Chrysalis. Daniel Glass, Peter Edge, people like that came through. Did you?
Simon Fuller started off as a junior A&R man. Guy Moot, obviously. Ron Fair, Jeff Aldridge. A whole host of people we started off with, and I think it's a great credit to us as a company that so many people started their career on the shop floor and who have gone on to do wonderful things. So I really take that as a big accolade, actually.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. The latest or greatest mistake that you've made? Well,
I mean, I would have to say the thing I most regret was selling the music publishing company when I got forced to sell it by that activist shareholder, who to this day thrives on the fact that he got one over me in forcing me to do that. I mean, it's just terrible. There had to be a way, and hard as I tried, there still had to be a way to stop that happening somehow. And so, yes, I do consider that to be a mistake.
Yeah.
And the worst ever mistake.
Okay. You did famously turn David Bowie down for records. You had him for publishing, but you didn't.
Well, to be honest, I didn't. I've given Terry credit for signing Blondie, fully deserved. It was Terry alone who turned David Bowie down for records. We did have him for publishing, and I was in America on tour with 10 Years After at the time, and he told me he'd listened to the album and he didn't like the album. And I came back from America and I listened to the album and I think, "Terry, what have you done here? Why did you do this?" But at the time, David Bowie had been like a one-hit wonder on Space Oddity. And but actually, I promise you, when I listened to that album, Hunky Dory album, I thought, "Oh, Terry, no, did you?" But it happens, we all turn down things. We turned down Dire Straits. And the first time I heard Dire Straits, I loved Dire Straits, and I always loved like guitar-based groups like that. And I said to how could we turn down that? And they said, you were at the meeting, we played it, and I said, I could not believe for 1 minute I would be at a meeting and turn that down. I'd trawl through the minutes, and we kept minutes. I'm digging through them. And it's 2 weeks when I was in America that they discussed Dire Straits and decided to turn them down. So no, it wasn't me, but yes, it happens.
Fair enough. The latest or greatest artist that you did work with?
I mean, 10 Years After were a great live act. I mean, they were perhaps the star of the whole Woodstock movie, and for a very good reason. And Procol Harum, I mean, I always say about Procol Harum, on a bad night, they were very bad. On a good night, they were unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And, you know, I remember, I think it was at the Grandie Ballroom in Detroit, the power went off for about 10 or 15 minutes. And they couldn't get it back on, and the whole audience for 10 or 15 minutes kept singing Whiter Shade of Pale, like about 4,000 or 5,000 people singing that, whilst the techs are trying to get the power going. It was amazing, some of the, the things that, I've lived through with some of the artists, but a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. The latest or greatest music industry party?
I was thinking about this. I mean, again, I've had an awful lot of parties. I'll tell you one party where you talk about when we sold out to EMI, and then we always had a Grammy party for Chrysalis, but it was really wasn't that major because we didn't have the budget. But then when we sold out to EMI, I went to the EMI Grammy party when the Grammys were in New York. It must have been about 1990 or something like that. And that was like a proper party. And when I was young enough to be able to, have all the fun of partying. And I remember there were an awful lot of people there, an awful lot of interesting people, an awful lot of supermodels there as well. And I'm chatting to supermodels and God knows what, and making connections with all kinds of people. And I ended up chatting to a British girl, young British girl, came from Streatham. And I'm just talking to her, and it's getting a bit late. And and I said, well, I think it's time to go. And she said, I'm thinking of going too. And where are you going, uptown or downtown? I'm going uptown. Well, should we share a cab? Well, I've got a car outside. I'll give you a lift. Okay, we'll get our bags and go. So I walk out with her, saying hi to everybody, get in the car, and and she very kindly drops me off at the Ritz-Carlton on Central Park South, and that's it. The next morning, I've got all my mates. Wow, man! Wow, how did you do that? Wow! I said, what are you talking about? Wow, Naomi, man! I said, Naomi who? Naomi Campbell! Who's she? I had no idea.
Fantastic stuff. They don't have parties like that anymore, do
they? They don't, do they?
No. And we can't let you go without giving us a new music tip. So I'm guessing you're listening to a lot of new artists. Now you've got the new label. Anything getting you very excited?
Well, what's in my head right now is Kick the Tires by a very young female artist we've signed. Kick the Tires by Flora Fiora.
Okay. And
it's an interesting. Can I tell you the story?
Please do.
I had some problems with my tech system down in Gloucestershire, and the guy came round to fix it. And I'm trying to get Spotify working properly, and we think we've got it sorted out. And he said, well, let's try it. So I said, well, let's ask to play something. So I'm about to say Spotify play, and this tech guy says Spotify. No, not Spotify, Alexa, play Fiora Fiore. I think, who the hell's Fiora Fiore? So he plays this, and I thought, that sounds good. Who's that? He said, it's my next door neighbour's daughter. And she was doing a gig in the village hall, and I got Mike Batt to come down, who I was friendly with. Mike Batt produced the first ever hit record for Chrysalis Records, which was All Around My Hat with Steel Eye Span. So Mike turns up at a village hall in Gloucestershire, and Roberta came as well, because she happened to be around that weekend, and we saw her perform, and we thought she was really interesting. And so she was only 17 at the time and still at school. She's 18 now. She's very good. She's a really great writer, and she's got a great voice and a great vibe. And Mike's produced four tracks for her with us, and we're just beginning to work on her. And I do think Kick the Tires, it's a great title, and it's got a great feel to it. And it's not about kicking tires and cars. It's, it's about personal relationships, obviously, which is what most young girls are interested in. And I think we've got a really good chance with Flora. We've got a good setup around her, and we're really hopeful that we're going to do something with her.
Fantastic. Well, we will check that out, but sadly, that's all we have time for. So a big thank you to our guest, the legend, it's Chris Wright. Thank you for coming on the show.
I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. The Money Trench, the music industry podcast with me, Mark Sutherland, is supported by SOUNDON and TIXEL and in support of Earth%. It's produced by Tape Notes and exec produced by Mike Walsh, with huge thanks to Sennheiser, The Fourth Pillar and our friends at Deviate Digital for our social media. The Money Trench music is by the brilliant Tom A. Smith, and to get in touch with us, please email mike@themoneytrench.com. And thanks this week to TYX Studios for their beautiful podcast studio and facilities. TYX Studios provides premium podcasting studio facilities and production assistance right in the heart of London. Check them out at tyxstudios.com. Summer may be here, but we have another TMT Tuesday showcase coming up, and we're very pleased to welcome our new sponsors at Venue. At Venue are the leading live events platform for touring artists, venues and festivals. Great to have you on board, and looking forward to making the events even better. You can see for yourself by joining us at the Victoria in Dalston on August the 18th, when Indoor Foxes, Bieber and Jolay will be playing in partnership with our friends at Fizz Panda, of course. Check the TMT newsletter and socials for details. Elsewhere, it's a quieter week for the biz as the out of offices really take over. But there's a Warner Music earnings call. The latest Rajars are out. Variety's Power of Young Hollywood takes place in LA. Boardmasters, Bloodstock, Diaspora Calling and Rebellion festivals are on. Plus there are big gigs for TMT, Tip, Lonnie Gunn, Sammy Virgie, Scissor Sisters and Gary Newman. And whether you're on holiday or in cars, TMT will return with another brand new episode on Monday, August the 10th, with another of our music biz friends Electric in the hot seat. We will see you then. Chris, thanks for coming on the show, and good luck with the new company.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.